The old woman's cane slipped on the polished marble, and the necklace she'd been holding clattered to the floor. "Careful," snapped the store manager, not moving an inch to help. "That's a $4,000 piece you almost dropped." Behind the counter, two younger clerks exchanged a look and laughed under their breath. The old woman, dressed in a threadbare cardigan and scuffed loafers, bent down slowly to retrieve the necklace herself, her hands trembling with the effort. Nobody stepped forward. Not the manager. Not the clerks admiring their reflections in the glass counters. Only one young woman set down the tray of rings she was polishing and crossed the floor. "Here, let me get that," she said, kneeling beside the woman. "Are you all right?" That woman's name was Grace Bennett, and she had worked the sales floor at Whitmore & Sons Fine Jewelry for almost a year. It hadn't been an easy year. Grace's manager, a sharp-tongued woman named Vanessa Price, treated her less like an employee and more like hired help, sending her to fetch dry cleaning, refill the coffee station, and scrub the vault room floor while the real salespeople handled the wealthy clientele. When Grace did manage to close a sale, Vanessa found ways to claim the commission for herself. Grace never fought it. She had bills to pay and a mother in assisted living who depended on every dollar she brought home. She helped the old woman to a velvet bench near the window and knelt in front of her. "Take your time," Grace said gently. "No rush at all." The woman studied her for a long moment, the way people do when kindness catches them off guard. "Most people would have just watched," she finally said. "Most people did," Grace answered, and something like a smile crossed the old woman's tired face. Her name, she said, was Eleanor. She'd wandered in on her way to visit family, drawn by the window display, though she admitted with a small laugh that she had no real business being in a store like this. Grace brought her a glass of water and sat with her for a few minutes despite Vanessa's pointed glare from across the room. "You'll get in trouble because of me," Eleanor warned. "Let her say something," Grace said. "Somebody had to check on you." What Grace didn't expect was what came next. Eleanor's eyes drifted toward the display case and she asked, almost playfully, if Grace would help her pick out 10 pieces, the finest necklaces, bracelets, and rings in the store. Grace blinked, certain she'd misheard. 10? "Yes, dear. The best you have." For the next hour, Grace poured everything she had into that sale. She pulled out velvet trays, matched stones to settings, and found the perfect bracelet to complement each necklace. Vanessa and the other clerks watched from a distance, whispering and snickering, certain the woman couldn't afford a single item, let alone 10. When Grace finally laid out the full collection and announced the total, just over $200,000, the old woman patted the pockets of her cardigan and gave an apologetic little laugh. "Oh dear. I seem to have left my wallet at home." The room erupted. Vanessa's laughter was the loudest of all. "You spent an hour on a woman who can't even afford bus fare," she said, stepping toward Grace with a cold, satisfied smile. "You really are something, aren't you?" Grace turned back to Eleanor instead of answering. "It's all right," she said softly. "Don't worry about it." Then she reached into her own purse, pulled out two $20 bills, nearly everything she had left until payday, and pressed them gently into the old woman's hand. "For a cab home." Eleanor stared at the money, then at Grace, her eyes suddenly glassy. "You are a rare soul," she whispered. Vanessa had seen enough. "I warned you about bringing riffraff into this store," she snapped. "You're an embarrassment to this brand. You're done here. Get your things and go." Grace didn't argue. She collected her bag, walked out the front door without a word, and didn't look back to see Eleanor watching her go with an expression that was anything but pity. It was quiet, unmistakable respect. What Grace couldn't have known was that Eleanor climbed into a cab, gave an address in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, and rode home to a house with iron gates and a driveway longer than the block Grace lived on. Waiting for her inside was her grandson, Nathaniel Whitmore, president of Whitmore & Sons, the very company that owned the store Grace had just been thrown out of. "Where have you been all afternoon?" Nathaniel asked, rising to meet her. "Testing the world," Eleanor said simply, easing into her favorite chair. "And I found something worth more than anything in that store." She told him everything, the fall, the laughter, the two $20 bills that had nearly emptied a young woman's purse. Nathaniel's jaw tightened with every word. "They threw a customer out of my own store," he said. "For being poor." "They threw out a girl with more grace than anyone in that building," Eleanor corrected. "Find her." By the following week, Grace had spent every waking hour job hunting, growing more anxious with each unanswered application. She was walking home from yet another interview that had gone nowhere when a black car eased to the curb beside her. A man in a dark suit stepped out. "Miss Bennett? My name is Marcus Chin. I'm Mr. Whitmore's assistant." He'd like to meet with you. Grace nearly laughed. I think you have the wrong person. The woman you helped last week sent me herself, Marcus said. You're perfectly safe. Please come with me. Against every instinct telling her this had to be some mistake, Grace got in the car. 20 minutes later she was standing in a glass office 40 floors above the city, and there, behind a wide mahogany desk, sat Nathaniel Whitmore, with Eleanor comfortably settled in a chair beside him. You, Grace said, stunned. Hello again, dear, Eleanor said warmly. Nathaniel extended a hand. Miss Bennet. Thank you for coming. I believe you've already met my grandmother. Grace's mind raced to catch up. The trembling old woman in the worn cardigan, the one her own manager had humiliated and thrown out, was the grandmother of the man who owned the entire company. I didn't know who she was, Grace said quietly. I would have helped her either way. That, Nathaniel said, is exactly why you're sitting here. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was an offer to lead customer relations and staff culture across the company's 12 regional stores. A role with a salary nearly triple what she'd made on the sales floor, full benefits and coverage for her mother's care facility. Grace stared at the papers, overwhelmed. I don't have the experience for something like this. You have something we can't teach, Nathaniel said. You treated a woman with nothing exactly the way you'd treat a woman with everything. That's rare. That's worth building a department around. Grace signed. Within a month, word reached Vanessa that the district office had renewed its lease specifically because of new leadership overseeing culture and training. Leadership that turned out to be the very woman she'd fired for showing kindness. Vanessa never apologized. But she never spoke that way to an employee again either. Grace threw herself into the new role, but not everyone in Nathaniel's orbit welcomed her. Camille Hastings, the daughter of a longtime family friend and a woman who had spent years positioning herself as Nathaniel's future wife, saw Grace as a threat the moment she learned Grace had moved into the Whitmore guest house at Eleanor's insistence. A guest? Camille said icily, looking Grace up and down at their first meeting. She's a shopgirl playing dress-up. Nathaniel's response was immediate. She's a guest in this house and you'll treat her with respect. Camille wasn't finished. She spread quiet rumors through the office, that Grace had slept her way into the position, that she was a gold digger chasing a payout. The whispers grew bolder until Nathaniel addressed the entire staff directly, making it clear that anyone repeating the gossip would be dismissed on the spot. The room went silent. Camille's humiliation was complete, and so was her resolve to destroy Grace by any means necessary. Weeks later, after Nathaniel and Grace had grown close enough that he finally asked her to dinner, Camille made her move. Late one night, she slipped into the family's private vault, took a diamond necklace worth close to $1 million, and hid it inside Grace's room in the guest house. The next morning, security guards and Nathaniel's mother, a formidable woman named Diane, arrived at Grace's door. We found the missing necklace in your room, Camille announced, feigning shock. I never wanted to believe it. Grace felt the floor drop out beneath her. I didn't take anything, she said, her voice shaking. Diane's expression hardened instantly. I knew this was too good to be true. Only Eleanor stood firm. Grace has more integrity than anyone in this room, she said. We're missing something. But the evidence was damning enough that Grace, humiliated and heartbroken, packed her bag and left the estate rather than fight a battle she couldn't win in that moment. Nathaniel wanted to stop her. Eleanor told him to let her go, for now, while he quietly pulled every frame of security footage from that night. It took him 3 days to find what he needed. Camille entering the vault, Camille lifting the necklace, Camille slipping into Grace's room. He called the family together and played it without a word of warning. Camille's face went white as the footage rolled. You framed an innocent woman because you couldn't stand losing, Nathaniel said, his voice flat with contempt. Get her out of this house. Camille was escorted out that same afternoon, her reputation and her place in the family gone for good. Diane, who had believed the worst of Grace without hesitation, sat in stunned silence long after the room had emptied. That evening she found Grace at the small apartment she'd returned to, sitting alone amid boxes she hadn't bothered to unpack. I misjudged you, Diane said simply, standing in the doorway. I'm sorry. Grace, exhausted and still raw, only nodded. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning, and in the weeks that followed, Diane made good on it, showing up with groceries, then coffee, then eventually just showing up the way family does. Nathaniel gave Grace time to find her footing again, and when he finally asked her to meet him at a quiet restaurant overlooking the city, she almost didn't go. But she remembered the way he'd defended her without hesitation, again and again, and she went. He didn't waste time with speeches. He simply took her hand across the table and told her that nothing about the money or the company mattered half as much as the fact that she had never once changed who she was. Not when she was mocked, not when she was fired, not when she was falsely accused. Then he asked her to marry him. Grace said yes with tears in her eyes, thinking not of the ring or the estate waiting for her, but of an old woman in a worn cardigan who had once told her, in a voice soft with certainty, that good things happen to good people. Vanessa heard the news the way most of the old jewelry shop staff did, through a headline. Whitmore heir marries former employee. When Nathaniel and Grace walked into the store together months later, Vanessa's smile was thin and brittle. "I came for one reason," Nathaniel told her, his voice even. "You humiliated a customer and you fired an employee for showing kindness. That ends today." Grace didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She simply asked Vanessa quietly to think about what kind of manager she wanted to be from here on, because Grace had already decided what kind of company she wanted to help build. A year later, she opened a foundation in Eleanor's name, training and hiring people the way no one had ever given her a real chance. Based on character, not appearance, not connections, not luck. On slow afternoons, Eleanor still liked to sit with Grace in the garden, sipping tea and watching the sun move across the lawn. "You never asked me why I did it," Eleanor said one evening. "Why I wandered into that store looking like I had nothing." "I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to," Grace said. Eleanor smiled. "I wanted to see who my family really was, through someone else's eyes. I got my answer faster than I expected." Grace thought often about that afternoon on the marble floor, the necklace at Eleanor's feet, the silence from everyone else in the room. She hadn't done anything she considered remarkable. She had only done what she believed anyone should do for a stranger in need. It turned out that was rarer and more powerful than she ever imagined. What would you have done if you were the only one who stepped forward that day? Would you have knelt down or looked away like everyone else? Tell us in the comments below. If this story moved you, give it a like, subscribe for more stories like this one, and share it with someone who needs the reminder that kindness always finds its way back.